Okay, the format for this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, our secretary's announcements, a coffee and snack break, and our main speaker. Our first speaker for tonight is Katie.
Hi, my name's Katie. I'm an alcoholic. First of all, I want to say welcome to the newcomers. There are a lot of you guys, and you're in the right place. I'm assuming if you're here, there's a reason. And also, welcome to all of our visitors, New York and South. Mississippi. And wherever else you guys are from, welcome. You're at home here. I actually just found out I was speaking 5 minutes ago, so here we go. But the thing is that in AA, the number one thing I was taught was that we say yes, because everything that has been so freely given to me, I need to give back, because that's how my sobriety works today, and I didn't understand that when I got here. I thought that I could just come to some meetings until I got my medication right, and that was the only problem that I had. And it turns out my problem is much deeper than medicine can treat. So I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is May 22nd of 2015. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. I sponsor women. I'm married to my husband, who's also very involved in the program. He sponsors. We're just like, AA isn't our whole life, but it's definitely at the top of the list, because if it wasn't, then nothing else in my life would be working out. Now, if you're new, don't let that scare you. It sounds kind of culty, but my experience has been that I didn't understand how AA or getting sober would get me a job, how it would get me like an iPhone or, a place to live so I'm not on a couch, or, not fight with people all the time or be pissed off all the time. And, when I came here, I was told, like, trust the process. And I was like, well, whatever that means, okay. And what I learned was that means just taking the action, right? So our job in this program, or my job as it was explained to me, was I'm in the work department and God's in the results department. Now, God doesn't have to be the God that you grew up with. I grew up Catholic. That was a very punishing God. But the good news is we get to come up with a God of our own understanding. Whatever that power is, that's not me. And so before I got sober, I didn't realize that I was selfish and that I lied a lot, and I thought I was really nice. But I was very cruel and sneaky, and I remember the first time I drank. I'm not going to go into it because I only have 10 minutes, but the first time I drank, we had friends and we were sharing, like, alcohol, and there's some Smirnoffs that we had saved in like someone's underwear drawer at a sleepover for later. And I said, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, I'll be right back. And I grabbed 2 and put them in my pockets and chugged them in the bathroom. And so, like, my first experience drinking, like, I was already getting sneaky. And the thing with drinking is that it doesn't just come out in the parts of my life that are involved with drinking or using, fill in the blank if alcohol wasn't your main thing, whatever takes me out of the state of mind and keeps me in self-will and not being able to see the world clearly as it is instead of how I want to see it. That's my problem. So what it looked like for me was I started drinking when I was 12 or 13. I started drinking when I was 13. I also learned to be honest, so I can't even lie about like little stuff like that, otherwise it'll get worse. I started drinking when I was 13. First I did it to be social and to be cool because I was in my awkward stage, which many of us I'm sure are familiar with. And what happened with my disease of alcoholism is that I got to a point where I was no longer drinking for fun. I was drinking because I couldn't stop. I had to drink. And I didn't realize that, right? Because the disease of alcoholism, it's in my voice. It sounds like me. It feels like me. It talks like me. But what I've come to find out is that's not the true me. That's my disease. And it sounds like a crazy person. And it is. It's insanity. It's insanity. And so I didn't realize that I was an alcoholic until when I was maybe 23 or 24. I was waking up in the morning and shaking and had to go to the liquor store, and they knew me there. And I would just say, I'm just going to get a 6-pack. Like, that's all. I don't need to drink more than that. And it's just beer, so it's not that bad. And then, like, within half an hour, I was back at the liquor store, and I was like, well, let me just get a 12-pack, and I'll get a bottle just in case, right? And I was putting vodka in my water bottle on the bus to work, and then I was doing fun activities in the bathroom on my lunch breaks or when I went to the bathroom. And, I had a good job, and I didn't understand why every job I tried, I just sabotaged or failed or couldn't, exceed at. And, part of that was low self-esteem, but part of that was because none of that was ever a priority for me. My priority before anything was, how do I get loaded? How do I get drunk, right? So when I got sober, I had to learn everything completely new. And I can't do that on my own because my head, my thinking is already messed up, right, as part of my disease. So I had to come in here and I had to do these steps, which was able to rearrange my thoughts and connect myself to a higher power that could flow through me and clear my thoughts and give me good intentions, and I could align myself with God's will, right? Because even if I really wanted to do the right thing before, I would go to Buddhist temples and I would go to Catholic church, and, I thought I was meditating and I'd read all these self-help books, and, I couldn't change. And this is the first thing I've ever done in life, therapy, psychiatry, all of that. This is the first thing I've ever done in life that has made me feel like that, I do go to therapy. I encourage, outside sources. It's in the book. We're okay with the outside help of medical professionals, but for me, this has been the most effective. I don't have to wake up and drink today. Yeah, go ahead. I don't have to wake up and drink today. And the only reason I'm able to do that is because I did, step one, I admitted I was powerless over alcohol, that my life had become unmanageable, not because I was getting in car accidents, not because I was getting in fights, but because I was messed up emotionally on the inside. I couldn't, maintain personal relationships. I was always depressed. I was always in financial insecurity, and then I came to believe in a power that wasn't the one that I grew up with, that I call God. And I then let that God lead me through life. I turned my will and my life over to the care of God, my thoughts and my actions. And when I do that, I'm able to align myself with the good part of me, I won't go into steps 4 through 8, but those are the action steps, and the rest of them I wouldn't necessarily say maintenance, because what I do is I work all 12 steps every day. From the time I wake up, I have to remember that I'm not free from alcoholism just because I went to a meeting yesterday, right? Or because I prayed last night. I wake up this morning and it starts all over again, right? So I wake up, I pray, I meditate. Throughout the day, I say, God, your will, not mine, because I know what mine does. It gets me into a lot of trouble and it makes me feel miserable inside. Even if there aren't outside problems that I cause, the way I feel inside is not worth it to me. So even if it's for a selfish reason, but the byproduct is that I end up being really nice and my family likes me. And I'm able to go to nursing school and I'm able to have a healthy relationship and be married, and not because it's not the things that I'm talking about, it's the principles that go behind those things that make me able to do them, right? So in nursing school right now, we're learning about the ethical characteristics of nurses, and one of them is accountability, and another one is beneficence, being nice, and I'm altruism, and I'm oh my God, these sound familiar. And what I realized a few years ago was that what I learned here, I can carry out in every area of my life. When I go to work, how can I be helpful to someone? Stay humble. Don't think that I know better than someone else, I learned to show up early and not be late to things. I learned to reach out my hand to people who look awkward or uncomfortable, and make them feel a part of. And so there are all these different things that I've learned in AA that are life skills, and as a result of that, I don't have to drink. I'm no longer a prisoner to drugs and alcohol. I don't have to do that stuff, and when I'm free of that, then I can be as free as I want to be. The sky's the limit. And, that was one of the first questions my first sponsor asked me when I was getting sober is she said, are you willing to go to any lengths for victory over drugs and alcohol? And I said, yes. And she said, so you would lick poop and walk down PCH naked and do cartwheels? And I was like, yeah. I felt so awful I would do it. And then she said, well, when you're in here, you can be as free as you want to be as long as you do these things. And ever since then, I've prayed to remain teachable, to remain willing, open-minded, honest. I still read the book. I keep a little just for today card in my wallet or my pocket all the time. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. There are times where there's someone doing something and I'm like, oh, it's stupid. And then I have to like reel it in really quick. But the good thing is like, I'm aware of it now, but it doesn't just come to being awareness. You know, the 10th step, we continue to take personal inventory. I'm aware of it, but then I change my actions, you know, because that's the thing here. I don't get to just be aware of all this cool stuff. Like, I have to live it. I can come up here and talk all this great stuff about a program, but what do I do when I drive out of that parking lot and I, like, walk into the grocery store and there's someone walking really slow in front of me? You know what I mean? So, how much time do I have left? Done? So I'm done, but I don't know really if I said anything that was coherent, but I hope that any of you got something from that, and thank you for letting me share.
To accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, our main speaker will share his or her experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Grover. I don't know where you're from.
Tacoma, Washington, but I've been up here, and I'm Grover, and I'm an alcoholic. I got a sobriety date of 4/27 of 22. I'm originally from Washington State. That's where all the trauma in my life and all that's happened. That's where I grew up. Jails, institutions, and death. And so this isn't my first bout of recovery. I came up here to get sober because I was on a pretty sick one after my wife passed, but I'll get into all that one. I started drinking involuntarily. My mom loved hot butter rums, and when I was 6, I'd end up down in some hot butter rums and wrapped up in a quilt. Back in the day, that's how they got rid of the colds. You know what I mean? Sometimes they didn't even put the butter rum mix in it. It was just a straight shot or two, and wrap you up in a quilt and tuck you in. Couldn't afford the clinics, and so that's why I said involuntarily, because when I was in diapers, that's how all my colds were running around with no clothes on and no shoes, just diapers, out in the snow, trying to keep up with my sisters. That's how it all went down. And I'm the only boy. I'm the youngest in my family. I got 2 sisters. I never had a father figure in my life. I was raised with 3 females, and that was not a fun road, I tell you. You know what I mean? There's one. I say, you know what I mean, a lot. You know, my mom she was an alcoholic as well, and so was both my sisters. I was the laughing stock all their parties. When Mom went to the bar, my sisters would get me drunk, smoke me out with some weed, and hopefully pass me out. If not, if I didn't pass out, I was the joke of their little circle. And that just escalated. You know, it's a progressive disease. You know, I got hooked on really young. I started stealing my mom's rum. I started stealing my sister's weed, and started doing all this stuff on my own way early. I got outside issues as part of my story, because I also have an issue with needles, just so you know. I'm not ashamed of it, because that's not who I am today. Because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I got down to causes and conditions. So, but the first time I started drinking on my own was when I started stealing the rum out of my mom's Foot Locker at the bottom of her bed in the trailer. And at first, I didn't catch on to putting water in her drink. You know, I was just drinking it. But then my sisters, I kept getting beaten down for it. So my sister's like, well, you need to dilute it. You know what I mean? Replace it with some water or some Coke or something, you know what I mean? Just if it was a different color. So I started learning tricks thanks to my sisters. But eventually I'd still end up getting beat down. And so 9, that was all the way up to about 9. 9 years old is when I started boosting Boone's Farm and Mad Dog 2020 and stealing from the stores with my buddy David. And we'd go climb up on top of the store and get drunk and end up falling halfway down the store trying to get down. And it was several times we ended up doing that. When I come home from spending the weekend with a friend of mine, and I saw through the crack of the door my sister's boyfriend shooting methamphetamine. And I saw how it had changed him. You know what I mean? Literally, it changed him. He went from an angry individual to I saw the big old, and then it was off and running. They were laughing and joking, happy, and I wanted some of that, you know, because being the youngest male, being the youngest in the family and the only male, every time my sisters did something wrong, I would get the ass whooping. You know what I mean? Every time, man, anything, the dishes wasn't done, the garbage wasn't taken out, you know, they come home late, I ended up getting my butt whooped, you know, and I had hair down to my butt because I'm part Native, and I've always been pretty adamant about my culture, so it was a handle for my mom to throw me around. It was a handle for my sisters to grab onto me and hold on to me while they kicked me and punch me, and yeah, it didn't deter me from growing my hair long, but it taught me how to duck and dodge. You know what I mean? So yeah, when I saw him put all of his utensils back in the top drawer of the dresser, after I saw him shoot that dope, and they left, they went to go to a party. My mom was passed out in the bed, and I went in and snuck all the stuff out of the drawer, and I didn't even know how to do it. I stuck it straight through. I just scooped some out of the bag and mixed it up with some water, pulled the filter out of a cigarette, and balled it up and did what I thought I'd, you know what I mean, just poke it and jam it. So that's what I did. And yeah, that's exactly what I said. And so I ended up with an abscess, and 2 days later, my sister saw me favoring my arm, and she was like, "What the heck's wrong with you?" And so I showed her, and she automatically looked at her boyfriend and said, "Mother," just started cussing him out. And so she grabbed my arm, she took me into the kitchen, she cut a potato in half, and she took a fork and she grated a bunch of potato and got a gauze pad, put it on my arm, and 3 days later it was gone. You know what I mean? That was an old Indian trick. And so that became a life-changing trick right there, you know? So, you know what I mean? So from that point on, you know what I mean, it saved me a lot of pain. And I was able to hide it from my mom. I was able to hide it from school, my teachers and principals, wood shop teacher. He was my wrestling coach. You know, even up till, man, just before I hopped on the plane to come up here to California, I used it. You know what I mean? Because, man, sometimes when you're falling out, you know, you never know. You just never know. And so that escalated, and it ended up to where I started stealing a lot more. I started lying a lot more. I started running away a lot more. I started dodging school a lot more. And it was just a progressive part to where I didn't understand it, but I had to have more. When I wasn't feeling that, I needed more. You know what I mean? That means sneaking into my sister's purse, my mom's purse. The guys that my mom brought home from the bar, I'd sneak into their wallets. I'd steal the change out of their purse. I'd crawl into his truck or their car, or their vehicles or whatever. I'd hit the ashtrays for the change, the glove boxes, all that. And that was that, you know. I'd do whatever it took. I'd steal their guns off the racks in their trucks and play dumb, you know. So that's that's where my disease took me. You know what I mean? And then it ended up going to juvenile, and then it ended up being foster homes because I started getting really off the hook. I'm part ADHD. I've been Ritalin all my life. You know, Adderall, all that. You know what I mean? And see, that stuff never really slowed me down. Is what it done is it leveled me out. You know what I mean? And then when I hit the methamphetamine and the black velvet, it was kind of like the methamphetamine I could drink all night long. And then when I started feeling the alcohol, I'd do another bammer, and then I'd be drinking and laughing and running and gunning all night long again. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like those I couldn't party without both of them. And I ended up going to juvenile for burglaries, and then I remember my mom going with her boyfriend on a fishing boat, and me and my buddy, we hit 21 log cabins on Palmer Lake in Washington, and we had one of those little 10 by 8 tin sheds right next to the A-frame that we lived in, full of everybody on the lake stuff. And we had a gallon of white wine. Me and my buddy were down there at the boat launch getting drunk, smoking some weed, and my mom comes home, and I'm trying to light this bowl, and the lighter went dead. So I had an X-Acto knife, and I tried, the little white thing out of the Bic lighters. I figured it was a refillable. Yeah, no. So I got him on the picnic table, and I cut my finger open. I'm like, wow, cool. You know what I mean? And then it started bleeding and all that, and then, all hell broke loose because I found out my mom was home, and she kicked my butt, called the cops on us, and put me in juvenile. And it's just crazy because I felt more comfortable in juvenile than I did on the streets, than I did in my own home. You know what I mean? Because it didn't matter if the dishes didn't get done, I was still getting my ass whipped. If the garbage didn't get, whatever it was, if my sisters did not do their chores, I was to blame. You know what I mean? If Elaine did something and Darcy came home and Frida was at the bar, I was still getting whipped by somebody in my family. And so I started fighting back. I grew up, I'm pretty adamant about not hitting women, but I grew up to where if you square up to me like a man, I'm going to take you down like a man. And that's the wrong way to think. You know what I mean? And the program straightened that thinking out. When I ended up in jail, I actually the first time when I ended up in jail instead of juvenile because of my extensive record and all that, it had a hardcore awakening. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of domestic violences in there. There's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't approve of, and I drank at it, drugged at it. Even though I was locked up, I was still getting high, still getting drunk, and jails, institutions, and death. Because I've run my truck off of the cliffs, drunk as hell, pissed off, just running from the cops. I'd literally run off into the lake. They couldn't catch me. I'm on the other side. Just a bunch of evil crap, man. And it's. I'm just grateful that I've learned a lot of my lessons through the step work of Alcoholics Anonymous. I found out exactly who I am. I learned a lot of stuff from a group of guys that brought me up, because I ran away when I was 13, and I was on my way to Canada. And I don't know if anybody knows Tacoma, Washington, but Tacoma, Washington, and Eastern Washington, Stevens County is like probably 42 miles, I believe it is, from the Canadian border. And I was panhandling at Safeway right there, and this guy and his wife come walking into the store, and I asked him for some change, and he said no, but he says if you're here when I get out, I got a job for you. And I made sure I was standing there, and so he took me up to the airport, They had a Harley shop sitting there on the side of the runway there, and that was my job. I started sweeping the shop. I started running the parts. He told me, he says, all you got to do is just sit there on your hands, keep your mouth shut, and keep your eyes and ears open. You know what I mean? And that's the way it went for a long, long time. You know, I'd always go back home and visit for a while, but I'd always come back. You know, and I built a family through them people. They showed me love. They showed me acceptance. They showed me, man, all sorts of different stuff that I didn't really want to learn, but I learned anyway. I couldn't prospect because I had a needle in my arm. You know what I mean? So I was just a parts runner and the fixer and a bunch of other stuff, and that's where I learned how to be a man to a certain extent. But then my first sentence into prison is where I really learned how to be a man. You know what I mean? Because I had to defend myself because my backside's not for anybody. You know, so I had to fight for that, and so I ended up. I'm going to fast forward a little bit because I ended up. I got about almost 20 years in prison because of running and gunning and being this fake dude that I used to be. Ran a lot of drugs, ran a lot of guns, and collected a lot of stuff for people that don't exist in my life today. And man, I ended up meeting this woman, got married. I went to go pay an LFO ticket at the courthouse, and she put her number on the back of my receipt. And when I called her that night, she had never went back to work after that. Yeah, it was like Bonnie and Clyde. And I had a 300ZX T-top turbo, and literally, we weren't robbing people. It was just, I got 11 pounds of dope in the back seat, and I mean, it was just crazy. And that was the extent of that. I ended up going to prison for a lot of that stuff, and she ended up getting pulmonary hypertension of the heart because she ate too much of my stuff, and it blew up the valve of her heart. And they parked me in prison for a while, and her feet started swelling up, and she ended up dead 13 days after I got out of prison. We were married for 15 years. We had 2 kids, and I was mad. I was angry at her. I resented her. I gave up on the kids. I gave up on the horse in the backyard. I gave up on the job. You know, I mean, I gave up on a lot of stuff. I had 5 cars, 3 trucks, bounce houses. I had trampolines, swimming pools, everything. I just left the front door open. I signed all the titles and registrations to the vehicles, left the keys in the ignitions, told my kids, grab whatever you wanted of mom's and what you want to take with you, and we're gone. You know, because I was fresh out of prison. I was 13 days out of prison when she died, and they wouldn't accept me. The landlord wouldn't accept me because the insurance wouldn't cover a convict, a felon. And man, she just had the whole time I was in prison, she just collected. And so they went to the in-laws, and I had a bunch of stuff up in the attic, and I sold some stuff, went down to Mr. Lee's, and I grabbed me a few 40s, and then I ended up riding into the Harley shop or the liquor store right next to the shop, and grabbed me a case of Black Velvet and a case of 10 packs of syringes, and I went out to Arch Lake, and I just sat there until it was all gone. I started just running a gun. I gave up on life and on everything, man. I gave up on the kids, gave up on all my family that wanted to partake and help me out, and yeah, no. I couldn't accept the help because of my ego and my pride. Plus the pain I was going through, I couldn't accept none of that stuff, man. I didn't know how to be a friend. I couldn't even be a parent, let alone a husband. I shoved all of it down. I wallowed in it, and it kicked my butt for a long, long time. I crawled into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and asked somebody to save my life. That room was off 136th and Pacific Avenue in Tacoma, Washington. I still remember it like it was yesterday. Because I walked in that room and I was crying and I asked somebody to save my life, take me through the big book. I heard that you guys could change what's going on up here. And so that worked out for a while. I had a sponsor that had a sponsor who had a sponsor. It became, for 2.5 years, it became a ritual. Go spend the weekend with my sponsor, go fishing on Saturday, barbecue on Sunday. We'd have Bill and Bob's story and all that all weekend. It was great, man. I had 9 sponsees, and everything until, misery loves company, so I shut the door on my higher power and I gave up on that, I got my kids back and I gave them away one more time. And once I take the drink takes me. Once I trigger that phenomenon of craving, all bets are off. I'm not the same individual once I consume that one drink. Once I take that one hit, the hit takes me in. I'm off and running and gunning again. There's no justification to anything. I don't care, and so I ended up going out on a 7.5 run, a 7.5 year run. I gave up everything. I was the kind of drunk and tweaker that I filled. I had a Chevy Silverado 4-door, 8-foot bed full of stuff, and I slept underneath my truck because I was homeless. You know what I mean? My stuff with the man with the most trinkets at the end wins. You know what I mean? And my truck was full, and I'd rather sleep underneath my truck than in my truck. You know what I mean? Because I couldn't let the trinkets go, man. The sparkly, shiny things. I had to keep them. They were my next load. They were my next bag, my next bottle. They was my next whatever. That was my ticket. And so, yeah, it didn't work. Then I landed a job. I was a sawyer for Evergreen Concrete Cutting there in Washington, and I got on a maintenance program. A shot in the morning, and a shot in the lunch, and a shot at night, and then I'd smoke some sativa at night so I could eat dinner. I could crawl into bed and pretend like I'm sleeping, and then my alarm goes off at 3:15. I'd get up, I'd do my shot, take my shot of whiskey, and then I'd eat breakfast, and then I'd go to work. And that was like that for a little while, and then my plug, I didn't know he was doing fentanyl and methamphetamine or shards, and he handed me the wrong bag. And one day I left work to do my ish, and it ended up being fentanyl. And I hit it in my neck. I didn't even get to plunge it in. I was out. That was at 11:45. I didn't get back to the yard until, 4:15, 4:30, something like that. And my boss come walking out, and he was like, "What the F are you doing?" You know what I mean? And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Man," he says, the whole yard's been driving by you all day, the whole time you've been gone, and your truck's running, you're passed out behind the wheel, you got a needle hanging out of your neck. You know what I mean? He goes, "I gotta let you go. You become a liability. You used to be an asset, but you're a liability now. And we work for the state sometimes. We have contracts. We cannot have you on the job, so I got to let you go." So he says, "You got insurance, so go get right." So that's how I ended up in California. I came up here to get right. I went through Gratitude Lodge. Let me tell you, that wasn't fun because without anything in my system, I was angry. I couldn't mourn my wife. I couldn't let go of all my shame and my guilt. I was stuck in morbid reflection on anything and everything. You look at me wrong, I was angry. I couldn't accept anything. And I remember sitting out at the picnic table while classes are going on, crying my eyes out, man, journaling, because I had two therapists thumping me. You know what I mean? Because I was angry. I was wanting to fight anybody and everything. And they started telling me to do these positive affirmations in the mirror every day. Every time I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, brushed my hair, took a shower, took a dump, it didn't matter. I needed to start saying these positive affirmations to myself because I was my own worst enemy. I could not love myself, accept myself. I was number one on my resentment list, except for God. God was right there below me because I resented him just as much as myself. If I could see him, taste him, touch him, I probably would have killed him. You know what I mean? Because I could not accept myself. I was very, very uncomfortable in my own skin. And it was his fault, everybody else's fault. I couldn't see the damage that I was doing in anybody else's life. And it started once I started paying attention to what these therapists were telling me. Things just really started to change up here because the book tells me lack of power is our dilemma and the problem centers between my ears, right? The way I think will kill me every time. It'll set me up for a fall every time because I don't know how to think straight. You know what I mean? They also, they tell me you can't think your way out of this. My thinking got me here. You know what I mean? It's a course of action that changes all that. And that's the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so the lack of power, the lack of power, how I get my power back is a consistent course of action, a consistent process of praying. I get out of my way upon awakening like the big book talks about, and then it started to change the way I was thinking, the way I was feeling. I quit sabotaging myself. I quit sabotaging my relationships, even in recovery, people who were trying to give me good advice, give me a hand up. I started somewhat feeling a little comfortable in my skin, not quite yet loving myself or accepting myself, but a little bit better than yesterday. And, it was when I got out of there, I took some advice from the therapists, and they told me to go to my first meeting, get a sponsor, get a big book, and get a commitment, and start working the steps like my life depended on it. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what I did. I followed their advice, and I went to the meeting. There was no men there that would put up with my stuff. There were none of them there that had a backbone, because I'm telling you, I was angry. I was intimidating. I didn't care. You know what I mean? And this gal, she was the only one that would stand up to me and tell me to shut the hell up. You know what I mean? Because she knew exactly what it was like to be exactly where I was at. And so that she ended up being my sponsor. And she took me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we sat at that fire after the meeting with flashlights, headlamps, and our lights off our phones, reading our book, doing the steps. And I got real honest. I had no choice, you know what I mean? Because I wanted to live. She told me to shut up, quit woo-is-meing, and quit crying about shit, and it's either get on living or get on dying. And that's exactly the process that I started following, you know what I mean? Because I had to find somebody that was doing the thing that showed me the way, because Grover's ego and my pride, I got this, you know what I mean? And one more time, I'm gone, I'm done. Either I break out in sparkly, shiny cuffs and shackles and on the Bluebird back to mainline. I was tired of that process. I had to find a different one. I ended up going through the steps, and, my life was definitely unmanageable, and I was powerless over everything, people, places, and things. And, I started to easing up on God because I started to see the group, my home group. I started to get to know people. You know what I mean? In the book, it says my own conception of a higher power. It's not the church or the Bible or the dude up there collecting your money. You know what I mean? I'm not a religious person whatsoever. I've been spiritual for a long time, and I started seeing God work through other people. You know what I mean? The way they talked, the way they approached people, the way they presented themselves. People just like me. You know what I mean? Just like me. And they was laughing and joking, and I wanted some of that. Because I couldn't laugh. I could look in the mirror and cuss myself out for 7 Sundays a month. You know what I mean? It didn't matter. I was still angry until I got into that 4th and 5th step. And, you know, I had to believe in something, that there was something in step 2. And then 3, am I willing to do it? And I had no choice. I had no choice. I wanted this malady out of me, you know, the spiritual malady that I was riddled with. You know, I had to take a chance, man, because I was killing myself, left and right, killing myself. I was setting myself up for a fail every day, you know, and so once I got into that 4th step, you know, it was kicking my butt at first. And then I went to Newport to Sandy Survivors, man. And one of the old timers, pulled him up and I talked to him and I asked him for some direction on that. And he told me, he says, man, just pray in. Just pray in and ask him to allow you to write everything that needs to be put on that piece of paper. And then when you're done and you ain't got no more to write, just pray out so you don't get stuck in that morbid reflection and when you can go out about your day. And it doesn't control your mind or anything. So that's what I did. And I was able to knock my 4th step out. And, you know, I sat there in front of that woman and I cried like a little girl. And, you know, I got down to causes in the conditions. And she wrote down a list of stuff. And I kind of got a little irritated at that. I didn't like that list because I knew I had a couple, but not that many. You know what I mean? I knew I was messed up, but I wasn't that bad, you know. But I needed that, you know. And in 6 and 7, you know, is man, that was another a milestone for me because I didn't want to let go of some of that stuff, because if I let go of some of that stuff, who am I going to be? Those were life, man, those are survival skills, you know what I mean? Those things kept me alive for so many years, kept me alive in prison, kept me alive on the streets, kept me alive at the club, kept me alive on runs. I mean, why would I want to let go of that stuff? You know what I mean? And there's 5. And but if I wanted something different, I had to do something different. And that's where my sponsor was like really adamant about, you know, well, what do you want to do for your recovery? What are you willing to do for your recovery? And, you know, old girl was talking about the naked and all that. Man, I was willing to push a baseball from base to base around a baseball diamond on my hands and knees. I don't give a crap. You know what I mean? Rain, snow, sleet, or shine. I'll push that ball around that baseball diamond. And ball naked, it didn't matter. You know what I mean? I wanted to live. I got tired of killing myself. And so that's exactly the willingness that I have today. You know, I surrender on a daily basis. And 6 and 7, it allowed me to let go of a lot of the ego and the pride. And, you know, allows me to surrender to this day. You know, I try to check all my character defects. If you really want to know if you're questioning your character defects and shortcomings, get in a relationship. You know what I mean? For real, get in a relationship. They'll let you know. Trust that, you know. And so I you know, it's a day-to-day process. It's nothing. It's not an overnight matter, and I don't think it's a one-and-done thing, you know, because I also do my steps, most of my steps on a day-to-day basis. I do a mental note on my step 10. You know, I don't pee in anybody's oatmeal. I don't step on any toes. I try not to do much of anything. I try to stay in service today. You know, I try to be selfless instead of selfish. I try to, I just try to be a maximum of service. Try to be the conduit. You know, I also go to sweat lodges. I do well-briety meetings. We're trying right now to get a location in Huntington Beach for spiritual healing ceremonies. I participate in a lot of stuff because it's life or death for me. Because if I drink, the drink takes me and I break out in cuffs. You know, I'm an extremist and an adrenaline junkie, and those aren't two combinations with a good bottle of booze. You know what I mean? So, right on, thank God. No. 5 minutes, yeah. No, but yeah, so today, 8 and 9, I flew back to Washington. To try to clean up the wreckage of my past. I got on the phone and they agreed to meet me, and neither one of them showed up. I flew back to Washington to do that, and nothing happened. At first, I was kind of offended, and I copped resentments. And in the big book, it tells us as long as we try. You know what I mean? It's our efforts, and so I couldn't really hold a grudge on any of that. Even though one was my 18-year-old daughter, I really would wish that she would get a hold of me, or at least let me apologize or whatever. But time takes time, and that's another thing I didn't like to accept either, because time's never on my time. It's always on God's time today. And so I put forth the effort to do it. I paid the money for the tickets, and went there and came back, and I tried. You know what I mean? I left a message with everybody that we all know, and let them know that I showed up, because that's all I can do. I can't make them sit there and listen to me. You know what I mean? I had to accept that and push forward. So 10, 11, and 12, I do my mental check in 10, and sometimes I'll ask somebody in the group if they see anything that I need to correct. You know what I mean? Because I'm willing to change. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to do what I got to do to stay on this course. You know what I mean? On this path. Because I believe in live, love, laugh. I don't believe in any of that other stuff today. I try not to be my own worst enemy. I try to be my best friend. And 11, I stay in conscious contact with my higher power, and I strengthen my connection with my higher power. I do not meditate. You know what I mean? I told you in the beginning that I was a Ritalin child, and it's still pretty hard to meditate. Even though upon awakening, I do roll out of bed on my knees, and I pray, and I thank Him for a lot of things, and I pray for a lot of people. And then I jump up and I get on the phone and I start doing my gratitude list, and I send to like 60 people. You know what I mean? The man that asked me to speak tonight, I met him one time, and it was on a job. And said something, and I said, yeah, jails, institutions, and death. And he come walking over to me and asked me if I was a friend of Bill's. And I said, yeah, I'm his cousin. And we exchanged numbers, and I've been shooting him texts every day, and that was almost 2 years ago. You know what I mean? And, he's been a good man, supporter of my recovery today, and that's the thing is I didn't have to know him. You know what I mean? All I needed to know is he was one of us, because it's a we program. I can't do this by myself. I can't do this without you guys, and that's why I try to, I'm not really one of these lip service dudes. You know what I mean? There's pieces of the book that I retain, because that's the pieces that I retain for me. I share them with my sponsees, and I'm pretty adamant. You know what I mean? Lip service don't cut it. It's a course of action that saves lives. And this course of action that the big book in the first 164 has saved my life. You know what I mean? And I got to give it away. I get to give it away in order to keep it. You know what I mean? And so that's what I do. I take a lot of guys to the book, and my home group's Tower 5 in Huntington Beach. You know what I mean? And I don't sugarcoat a lot of stuff. Even though I got somewhat of a filter now, but not much. I'm still a convict. I'm not as institutionalized, but it's all right there. just one bad sentence or a word or whatever away from going right back to there. You know what I mean? My anger's not really there anymore. It could be, but it's not. It's not something that I focus on today. I try to focus on staying in the solution instead of the problem. I enjoy life. I'm comfortable in my skin today. I got a beautiful woman. We got our own place. I bought my own rig. You know, I don't work for the company that I worked for the first year. I kind of had some health issues, and then I ended up going out on my own and doing some side jobs and made some business cards, and you know, so there's some financial insecurity, and it's leaking into my economic insecurity, and so it's kind of crazy, man. Also my sponsors. I've had a few sponsors in the 22 months that I've been sober. After the first one walked me through the steps, and she ended up doing something after her dad passed. She walked her own path, and ended up getting another sponsor. And one thing, if you're new, when your sponsor tells you or suggests not to do something, I suggest you don't do it, because they'll fire you too. You know what I mean? Because for the first year, I didn't mess with no women. I didn't come to California to chase any woman. You know what I mean? I didn't come here because I had a problem with my thinking. You know what I mean? I could not make the right decision. I could not on anything. You know what I mean? See, I'm on the beach all the time, so there's a lot of TNA everywhere. You know what I mean? But see, I didn't come here for that. I had to figure out to change the way I thought. Because if you had a life like I had, you would do whatever it took to stay out of prison. You know what I mean? To feel comfortable in my own skin. I didn't have to lie. I don't have to cheat. I don't have to do none of that. You know what I mean? None of that today. And that's because I stayed the course. You know what I mean? I followed directions from my first sponsor, and you know, it was almost a year when I just had this grandiose idea of scratching an itch. You know what I mean? And my sponsor fired me. You know, and so I had to get another one, and that didn't work out too well either, because I knew how to be angry. You know what I mean? I didn't need direction on how to be angry. I'm good at that. I could flip a switch and be ranting and raving about anything and everything right here, right now. You know what I mean? All I got to do is think about the past, and I'm right there. You know? So I went to the Sweat Lodge, and I prayed about it, and I got another guy. He's got 38 years. And let me tell you, man, these old timers, you better tie your socks on, man, because this dude's got me thinking about creating my own God, right? How do you do that? I had 2.5 years of sobriety, and that's as far as I could see myself passing, is at 2.5 years sobriety, because I've been running and gunning and living a life that I do that's never existed in anything good. You know what I mean? Anything good. So to create my own God, I wouldn't even be able to begin on what that would look like, you know? But he's got me doing that. You know what I mean? He's walking me back through the steps, and we're doing exactly the way he wanted, because I asked him to be my sponsor, because he has what I want. And so, boy, did I bite off, boy. Yeah, it was a big bite. And so I have to keep asking my brothers, you know what I mean, in AA, that's got 10, 15, 18, 30 years, you know what I mean? Joe's fixing to get hit up too after the meeting. So, because I need a different variety of opinions on how to create my own God. You know what I mean? Because I'm not trying to draw no cartoon. I'm trying to get some lifey life stuff. I need answers. I need solutions. I need directions. I need a roadmap. Because left to my own devices, I'm going to end up drawing cartoons and stick figures. And yeah, it's all right, I guess, at first, you know, being fresh in recovery. But, I like to be the A game. I like to bring my A game when it comes to life, because I don't like to lose. I've been losing all my life, and I'm not there anymore. I want to live today, and I want to win, So, if you're struggling, just keep coming back. The only wrong question is the one that's not asked. You ain't got a sponsor, get a sponsor. You ain't got a big book, you heard the literature gal. She'll work it out with you, man. Get into it. Yeah. Get somebody that knows something about that life-changing process that's outlined in the 164 in that big book, because it will change your life if you do the work. This isn't a lip service program. I tried it. It didn't work. Yeah, man. Thank God this one's over. But, but yeah, so, just keep it as simple as possible. I pray to get out of my way, and I surrender on a daily basis, man. And let me tell you, it's changed the way I think, the way I'm able to show up for other people in the program today. I'm not fake anymore. I'm not a hijacker. I'm not. I just show up with the answers that's been given to me outlined in that book, man. If you read it, you don't have to run from nothing. The answers are right there. And that's how I approach it on a day-to-day basis. I almost came in with my big book, but I didn't want to look like no big old thumper or something. So I took it back out to the truck because I wanted to read the third step prayer. Yeah, that's about it, man. I just know today that I don't have to live like I did yesterday. All I have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition today. And if I stay, to thy own self be true, as long as I stay to that course right there, every day's a win. I cannot stay sober on yesterday's recovery. All I have is today, and today is not, or tomorrow's not promised. And I learned that from a friend of mine that I've been following AA. He's got 3 years. And we're not a glum lot. We've gone Lake Havasu. We went up to the convention up there at the Riverside Casino. Thank God I gave him all my money. I would have lost it all. But yeah, I did some water sports for the first time. Went parachuting up in San Diego. We go camping. These are things that I've done in recovery that I would never have even attempted anywhere else. You know what I mean? And the conventions are a good way to get a different dose from a variety of places in the world, outside of California and all that, because it gets stale in AA, man. It gets stale sometimes. You keep going to the same old groups, the same old stories, same old people, and you got to spread your wings and wiggle your tail feathers, you know what I mean? Because, man, what exactly are you willing to do for your own recovery? What are you willing to do for your life today? Like I said, I'm willing to push a baseball around a baseball diamond right now. So, yeah, I'm grateful for the air I breathe and being on the right side of the dirt. And I thank you guys for my recovery today, man. Because
I would like to thank our speakers, Katie and Grover. And our readers, MJ and Natalie.